is Hussain Jagot, and I joined Bishop Mackenzie in 2008 in Standard 1, and I graduated in 2021. I was actually born in Harare in Zimbabwe because that's where my mom's from. So that's where I was born, lived there for about 5 years. And then when I was five, moved to Malawi because that's where majority of my dad's family was from. And yeah, I think the reason my siblings and I sort of joined Bishop was because um, my cousins had been going to Bishop. I think one of my oldest cousins, I think the first Jagot family member actually joined Bishop Mackenzie in 1980. So our families had been at Bishop for a very, very long time. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the major reasons. And I think my parents knew like putting us in international school would obviously present lots of opportunities. And they tend to emphasize education quite a bit, and that was pretty important to them. So I think that's why they chose Bishop. So obviously it was a very, very, very long time. I think that 13 years of my life at Bishop Mackenzie. So obviously very, very different as things, move through. I think probably the first memory that I have from Bishop Mackenzie is standing in the middle of a circle in year one, spinning around to decide who I'd take the register to the office with. So I think from there all the way up until my graduation, there's just, so many things that happen, so much change. But overarching, I think, yeah, Bishop Mackenzie was awesome. There was so much, learning and development and growth for me. And I think, like, it goes without saying that without any of that experience, I don't think I'd be where I am today or who I am today. But overall, yeah, I think on the day to day, Bishop Mackenzie was great. There was loads of opportunities to engage with people. I think one thing that I liked so much was it really gave you the chance to meet so many different people all the time. I think that's any international school, but I feel like the tight-knit community at Bishop was probably something that was so appealing. You always knew people older than you knew people younger than you. There were so many opportunities to, develop close relationships with people because we weren't such a massive school, which I think is probably like a massive, massive selling point. I think our year group was the first year group not to do anything part of the GCSE system and do the MYP system from year seven onwards. Because my sister, who graduated 5 years before me, her cohort were the last ones to do GCSEs. But I think we were the first ones to see the MYP throughout the whole of secondary and then into IB as well. I think it's hard to sort of say. I think that sort of emphasis that MYP brings, I think it's a lot more. I think it definitely prepares you better for IB, which is ironic given that we don't do very many exams or didn't do very many exams in MYP. But I think it sort of prepares you in terms of, all of the additional things that you have to do in IB because your academics are one thing, your classes are one thing, but you've also got, TOK, you've got service and action, you've got all of that, CAS, you've got all of that stuff. And with MYP, that was emphasized from the get-go. Like I remember from year seven having to do a service activity, for example. And I think the style of like assessments and assignments and stuff was very well suited to preparing you for IB, of course, because then you've got the extended essay, you've got TOK essays, you've got your IAs and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think it probably prepared me better, that style of learning and the whole idea, like I think MYP and IB is based on application, and that's a skill that we developed right from the beginning. So yeah, I do think we were better set up for success compared to previous cohorts who might have done GCSEs. IB teaches you a lot of skills, in terms of your academics alone. For me, it's definitely been a bit different because I'm studying architecture at the moment, and throughout IB and throughout MYP, I was a lot more focused in like the social sciences. That's where a lot of my interest was. So I can't say that I've managed to use, like apply a lot of the content and stuff that I might have learned, but the skills are definitely still there, like managing your time, staying organized, which is so imperative in something like architecture. And just learning to be like balanced and just be, globally aware, and just conscious of, how the world works. I think that exposure is something that we gain at Bishop Mackenzie. And having come to Australia where, a lot of the people that I'm meeting, a lot of my friends, a lot of them are local, and you can kind of just understand the difference between, how much more experience I think we gain from doing a system like the IB and being at an international school, compared to the people here who, have been born and raised, went to a public school. They don't really know much more else beyond, the city of like Melbourne, for example, which I've always found very like fascinating and very interesting. I think there's definitely a lot. And there's probably quite a few that, I'm gonna forget to talk about from when I was particularly younger. But I would definitely say like one thing that obviously sticks out to me, like I think starting early, one of the first sort of memories that I have, like an in-depth memory, was probably in like standard five. And I think this is where sort of the whole Bishop Mackenzie philosophy was kind of like introduced to me, and where I sort of had the opportunity to engage with that. And I remember, planning some sort of like activity or fun day with a group of my friends, because we wanted to raise money for a charity. I don't even know what charity it was for. And yeah, I think that was such a fun memory, and like a core memory that I have from Bishop Mackenzie, and it wasn't even the event itself. It was more like, sitting in the classroom during break time, playing it and feeling like we were so important because we had something to do. And just developing those relationships. And I'm really good friends with one of the people that I had started that with, and that's where our friendship started. So that's definitely like a core memory for me. And I remember we raised like 20,000 kwacha, and we thought it was so monumental and so amazing that we had done something like that. And I think like that's where you kind of get introduced to that philosophy of, engaging with the community, actually doing something for somebody else aside from yourself, learning to help those who need our help. And I think Bishop Mackenzie is very conscious in making sure that their students acknowledge the privilege that they have, especially because we live in a country like Malawi, which I think is so important. And that really continued onwards up until, I graduated. And it's given me a lot of lessons and a lot of experience and a desire to continue that after school as well. So yeah, I'd probably say that's one of the first memories. And another thing that really sticks out to me from Bishop is going on all of the trips around Malawi. I remember in secondary school, they introduced this thing called Week Without Walls, where every year group would basically, go somewhere on a 3-day, 3-night, 4-day trip or something. And those were always such fun opportunities to, get to know your peers better. And by the time you get to like year 10, 11, 12, you already know everybody so well, that, you're a tight-knit group already. And it's just an opportunity for everybody to have fun together. And, whether it was like abseiling like in Luawa in year 13, or I remember like climbing some mountain, I think in Mangochi or Namizimu or something like that, in like year 6. It was always like an amazing experience. And we don't really get to see much of Malawi anyways, because you're busy with school and stuff like that. So it was always nice to kind of see those different places and have those experiences as well. I'd probably say another thing would be, I went on a few other international trips as well for Model UN. So I was really engaged with that, which I absolutely loved. When I was in year 9, I think that must have been 2017, I think. 2017 or 2016, where I went to a conference in Dubai. And that was like such an amazing experience. It was so much fun. I went with a bunch of my friends as well, which was like really good. And then, it felt like a bit of a holiday as well, because I mean, it's Dubai. So, and then I think a really special one was going to the UN headquarters to Nairobi when I was in year 11, for MUN as well. And I managed to win an award for best speaker in my committee, which is like a moment that, I always remember, such a good memory as well. And then probably another one, winning the student council election. So I was president when I was in year 12, and that's probably another massive highlight during my time at BMIS. I did it again with 5 of my closest friends who I'm still in contact with. So we all just had such a good time together, planning events and pulling them off and stressing about it, and sitting in the art room filling leaves into bin bags because we wanted to make corpses for our haunted house or something like that. So I think it was all of those fun memories. And then last but not least, I think being able to give a speech at graduation as valedictorian was like an amazing, amazing opportunity for me. And I think it was a culmination of everything that I had learned at Bishop Mackenzie, because I took that opportunity to speak about what was happening in Palestine at the time, which is something that I was so passionate about, and something that my teachers recognized as an interest and always encouraged me to sort of pursue that. I ended up writing my extended essay about that as well. And obviously at the time, there was like some atrocities going on there as well. So being able to speak about that in front of everybody is, yeah, probably out of all the memories I've talked about, that was definitely the most special one. To be honest, I wasn't always like that. I think if you had to maybe ask my teachers from year 7 and year 8, they'd probably tell you that I was a bit of a troublemaker. So yeah, I mean, I used to be very distracting in class and stuff like that. But I think, as I sort of matured and as I grew older, I kind of came to realize, the importance of school and doing well. Not to say that I had been, slacking off when I was younger, but I definitely wasn't as engaged. Probably in about like year 9 or year 10, I had a bit of a turning point where, I became very engaged in my academics and in my studies. And I think I was just always very, very motivated to do well in school. And to be completely honest with you, that wasn't even something that was, I never ever felt any pressure from anybody to do well. It was always from myself. And I owe a lot of my success to my parents, because I think in our culture, it's very common for parents to pressure their kids to do well. But my parents were the complete opposite of that. And I think because of that, I was able to succeed, because I always did everything, on my own accord, and because I wanted to. And I think Bishop just kind of sets you up to maintain a balanced lifestyle, because in a way, it encourages you to do things that you wouldn't normally do. For example, like CAS, service and action, playing sport. So I was involved in hockey. I used to play basketball as well, or like very casually as well. I wasn't like super competitive in terms of sport, but just doing all of these additional things, it kind of taught me to sort of, it taught me how to prioritize. It taught me how to manage my time. It taught me how to be organized. But I think that balance is also so important, because it allows you to stay motivated. You need time off. And I think at uni, unfortunately, that's something that I haven't been super great at in terms of continuing. And I've noticed like a discrepancy as well in terms of how motivated I am. So I think, even though sometimes when I was younger, I used to be like, oh, I can't believe we have to do service and action. Like it's so boring or whatever. Looking back at it, I truly understand the importance of it. And I think that's the whole model that Bishop preaches, which is really, really, really helpful for students to succeed. At first, it was, it was as terrible as the situation was. I think it seemed like something new and something fun. And, I didn't have to wake up an hour earlier to get ready because I needed to get to school or whatever. I could wake up 20 minutes before, hop into the shower, come out and sit at my desk, and, everything would be ready for me to go. And, it was fun in the beginning for the first 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously, there was a lot of uncertainty. But, it was fun to be online and to have that convenience or whatever. But I think slowly, when we actually realized the scale of the pandemic, and the impact that it was having in other places, it was very tough. It became very difficult. And I think the later that it went on, so I think we sort of closed school in about March, and up until the end of the academic year, we were online. And then we started the academic year again online for about, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. And then we went to in-person from September up until December. And then the next year, between January and March, we went back online because there was another variant that had come out. So every time that kept on happening, it was very demotivating, because you almost felt like you were being robbed of your high school experience, which is never a nice feeling. Like I remember the first few months of year 12 was so awesome. We had so much fun. I was so engaged with student council, and, it was just an overall really good vibe. And when COVID came, it kind of it took all of that away. So when when we did go back to school, it was never the same as it had been before, because we were we were all isolated in terms of like each year group was given a designated space in the school, and you could only stay within that space. There was no moving around between classrooms. Teachers would move between classes for different year levels, but every year level had a designated space within school. And then there was stuff like, we all had to take different paths to our classrooms. Like every year group was given a different path to get to their specific section. We really didn't have the opportunity to move around. We sat at school with like desk dividers to split students up, wearing masks the whole day. And, we tried to make the most of it. And we were lucky in Malawi that, it wasn't as bad as it was in other places. So, we got away with, breaking the rules here or there a bit, without really having to see the consequences of that. But it was very unfortunate. It was very difficult. And I think in your last few months of school, you don't want to be sitting on a screen at home when you've spent the past how many years building relationships with people. You want to be in person. We didn't have the chance to do after school activities. We didn't have the chance to, do CAS. We didn't have the chance to go in, walk around the school whenever we wanted to during our free periods or whatever. So yeah, it was tough. It was very tough, but I think, the teachers really tried. And in that situation, like there was truly nothing that could have been done. The school was prioritizing everyone's safety, which is completely understandable. But yeah, it was a very unfortunate situation, but nonetheless, very grateful that we had about a month and a half back at school before we fully closed. We managed to do our exams in person. We had an in-person graduation as well, even though we were wearing masks. But I'm still grateful that we could have at least that much to sort of, look back on. Because I know the year before didn't have an in-person graduation, which I can't imagine how that might have felt for them. I'm finishing off my second year of university in about 2 weeks or so. I actually ended up taking a gap year after I finished school, just because Australia's borders were closed. And so like I couldn't go. I actually started uni online, and within like the first week or so, with the time difference and set out and stuff, I was like, nah, I don't want to do this. I don't want to ruin my uni experience and have to do things online. I'd rather just wait until I can actually travel and go. So I ended up taking a gap year. So I'm now finishing off my second year out of 3, my bachelor's degree. And after that, to be honest, I haven't fully decided what I'm going to do. I'm not 100% sure what I want to do, but I am still inclined to sort of continue with architecture, perhaps get some work experience. But I'm definitely open to other stuff. I think for me, the overarching kind of idea for my career that I see at the moment is I definitely want to do something relating to sort of sustainability. So if that's within architecture, probably like, hospitality design, ecotourism design. And then potentially I'm quite engaged in some consulting stuff as well. So I'm currently in a consulting club that we consult for not-for-profit organizations. Again, that's where I feel like my service sort of experience and values kind of come into play in terms of my uni experience. So perhaps something to do with, ESD consulting or sustainability consulting, somewhere within all of that for now. I think the school, what I want to say is the school gave me the confidence to be able to, at the last minute say, actually, I think I want to study architecture. I remember, this is probably not a very popular story, but to share, but I remember being called into Mr. Mack's office. I'm sure you know Mr. Mack, the visual arts teacher. So he became our DP coordinator. And I remember being called into his office about the time that I was going to apply for university applications. And I remember him saying to me, I have a bone to pick with you. And I asked him why. And he said, why are you studying architecture? Why have you applied to study architecture? And I said, oh, well, because, that's what I want to do. I've always been interested in design, but I've never really, had the confidence to actually pursue it. And he was like, I'm not really sure that you're making the right decision there. And he was like, oh, you set yourself up really well to study something in the social sciences, perhaps law or politics and stuff, which is what I initially thought I would go into. And I think in that moment, I use that as motivation, because I like it when somebody tells me I can't do something. because it gives me the incentive to prove to them that I can. And I know that he probably didn't, he was probably had my best interest in mind. But I think, yeah, I think Bishop gave me the confidence to actually say, you know what, I need to be true to myself. I need to be honest with myself. And that means studying architecture because I think throughout school, I had always been very interested in design. A lot of it started with my personal project, which was, I'm sure, I don't think you did that having done GCSEs, but that was like a sort of the last project you do, a big project you do in year 11 for MYP. And you basically choose a topic of any kind that you want to do. And it's a project that you overtake like from the end of year 10 up until like halfway into year 11. And so I did it on like long exposure photography and light painting, which was like my first sort of engagement with like any sort of creative thing. And I think in that whole experience, I kind of realized that, you know what, I do actually have a creative side that I want to pursue. And the more I went on, the more intrigued I became about it. And I always said to myself that I'll probably ask myself, what if I don't study architecture? But now that I've chosen this path, I don't think about, oh, what if I had done something like law or politics? Whereas if it was the other way around, I feel like I would have always wondered. So wherever this degree takes me, I don't think I will ever regret it. And I think again, like I owe a lot of that to BMIS making me confident enough to put myself forward and to put myself into, a potentially very challenging situation. I mean, I think Bishop Mackenzie's had significant development. Like, I think to start off with, I remember when I had joined and when I was in like year 3 and year 4, there was no big cafeteria or anything like that as there's now. There was a little tuck shop, which I'm sure you might remember as well. So I think like Bishop Mackenzie's had loads of development on that front in terms of like, introducing all of these new sort of buildings and stuff like the lower hall that came in. I now see that the upper hall's been renovated as well. We had the music room that was renovated. We had like the language classrooms which were renovated. We had so many like pop-up gardens come up as well. So I think the school from when I joined up until when I left, the sort of environment that was created, which was obviously largely a result of the planning and development. And I feel like I see more of that now that I am studying architecture. I think that was probably one thing that changed the most, and one thing that I really loved about Bishop, being able to always be outside and be outdoors, having to walk between different paths to get to different classrooms and stuff, which was always very, very nice. And I think that sort of learning environment is probably supplemented with like the sort of quality of education. I think from when I joined in year 7 and the way things were done in IB for my sister compared to how they were done for me, I think I could sort of compare those two experiences and recognize that, a lot more was being done. There was a lot more support that was provided to students as we went on. A lot more encouragement to be engaged in the community, which I feel like wasn't pushed on as much before. And I think that all of that comes with the whole adoption of that IB system and that MYP system as well. So yeah, I think those are probably the main things. The other thing that I sort of noticed as well is I feel like when I was in the younger years, maybe like year 7, year 8, year 9, year 10, Bishop Mackenzie was a lot more diverse compared to maybe later on. But I think later on, that was probably because, the cohorts reduced. People tend to go abroad to study in their last 2 years for where they plan to go to university. And then obviously with the whole COVID thing, that also had a massive impact. But yeah, I mean, I was there for a long time, so you'd think I'd have more to say, but honestly, I can't really think of anything else. It was more, I think it was more to do with like having local students, but having people who had been there for a very long time as well. So I think, before we'd have a lot of, there was like a very low retention at Bishop Mackenzie because it is an international school. People come for 2 years and then, they move back or whatever. But in my last few years, probably from year 10 onwards, there was definitely like a lot less people coming in. So whilst it was still diverse, the amount of people coming in was a lot less, and a lot of people were actually leaving. I remember after year 11, we had a massive amount of people who had left. And yeah, I think like for my brother and my sister, that wasn't something that they had experienced in their year groups, but I think that sort of became more of a trend for people to move abroad before they graduate, to the UK or to the States or wherever it might be. I guess the only thing is like I think I only have good to say about Bishop Mackenzie overall. I think, as I said, like when we started off, without Bishop Mackenzie and the experiences and the lessons that I learned there, I don't think I could have been where I am today. And I owe a lot of my success to all of my past teachers, you know, teachers, my parents as well, and just the overall community. Which yeah, I'm very grateful. I think being in Australia, I every single day, when my friends are talking about their experiences in school, I'm more and more grateful that I had the chance to be at an international school, and to be at Bishop Mackenzie as well.